Thank you. Yeah, my first question is going to focus on using the sites of former coal-fired power plants. Obviously, this is an important question for me. One of the reasons that West Virginia changed their law, I think, was to try to take advantage of some of the, or to remove the barriers of nuclear energy, but also to couple those two initiatives together. I believe that in Wyoming, this is already moving forward. So, Ms. Korsnick, what can we do, either Congress or at the NRC, to facilitate the creation of nuclear jobs in these former coal communities?
Thank you, Senator Capito, for the question. And you're right on mark. Repurposing coal plants or other fossil plants is extremely attractive for future nuclear plant siting. For one thing, they have the transmission already there. That's a challenging part of the infrastructure, if you will. It's costly to build, so it's a great opportunity to reuse that. And I can say, just a point of note, recently the NRC did revise some staff guidance that would actually help for coal plant operators to receive some credit for their experience operating fossil plants as part of their review process to become a certified nuclear operator. And it's things like that that we can do. I operated nuclear power plants for many, many years. And when we did refueling outages, we brought the folks down from the coal plants to help us in our refueling outages. So nuclear and coal, nuclear and fossil have a long history of partnership. And nuclear plants, we boil water differently, perhaps than a coal plant. But after that, once you've turned it into steam, there's a lot of similarities in the jobs and a high degree of opportunity for us to bring jobs to these former coal plants.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to talk a bit about the expense. Mr. Harrell, I believe you mentioned an application that had cost $500 million, and I can't remember how long it took. But obviously, this has got to be a sticking point of the initial application, but also the innovation that's going to be required. What kind of ideas would you have in terms of being able to afford to actually move in this direction?
Yeah, it's a great question, Senator Capito, and thank you for your strong leadership on this bill and other clean energy issues, both at this committee and at the Appropriations Committee. Yeah, I think one of the key ideas here, and included in your legislation, is the kind of X prize to offset some of the fees related. I was mentioning NuScale in my testimony, $500 million over five years to get to design certification, $70 million of that in fees. That's a huge barrier to entry, and there are a variety of exciting advanced reactor companies that have technology that can contribute to both our economy and to emissions reductions that are startups, that are venture capital raised. And so that type of financial barrier is providing a barrier for those companies to move forward, and essentially saying you need big backers to move forward. And I think that's squandering an opportunity for American entrepreneurs as a whole. And so right-sizing regulations to make sure that they're consistent with the true risk of these reactors, and so we're not doing a dilatory review of type of things, and then providing support to some of these advanced reactors, particularly first movers who are doing the heavy lifting here at the onset, I think are really important.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciated Mr. Cohen's response on hydrogen to Senator Whitehouse's question. But I would like to ask both of you if you have anything to add on what the innovators that are developing designs to generate high temperature heat to be used for manufacturing and industrial purposes. We're requiring the NRC to identify and address potential regulatory barriers to deploying this for other technologies. Where is the, I guess, the nexus here between creating a hydrogen economy and having nuclear power at the same time? So I'll go to you, Mr. Harrell, first, and then Ms. Korsnick.
Yeah, that's one of the most exciting components of these new designs, a bunch of different applications. Nuclear can play a huge role in hydrogen production as a 24/7 resource, and it contributes to kind of the cost paradigm, the ability to use process heat in manufacturing of hard-to-abate sectors like steel and concrete. And even outside of the climate space, nuclear thermal propulsion is a really excited opportunity in a way that, these new technologies can help expand our space frontiers. And so we're excited about it, but it's a new frontier for the NRC, and they're used to only electrical applications.
Right. Ms. Korsnick, did you have anything to add there?
Yes, thank you. I would just add that we talk about how long it took to license some of these technologies, but after you license it, there's also a licensing process for the site. In other words, a site selection process. And when you asked earlier about sort of what other things can we do, what are the next barriers, I think we need to really look at the NRC process for siting so we can take some of these coal sites and sort of quickly understand that they're suitable for nuclear. And I think it goes to your last question as well. If you're going to use nuclear for other things, you're going to want to site those nuclear plants, in fact, near some of these manufacturing facilities. So there's a nexus around siting and making the siting process more effective and more efficient.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a couple quick questions. I wanted to ask, first of all, before I do that, because I forgot to do this before, I would like to ask unanimous consent to insert two articles into the record. One is an article from Reuters titled, "California Urged to Keep Nuclear Plant Open to Meet Climate Goals," and the other is from Forbes titled, "NRC's Rejection of Okla Application," which we've heard about in this hearing, shows U.S. is miles behind China in advanced nuclear reactors. And I would say to my friend who's leaving from Massachusetts that I am for an all-of-the-above energy plan myself. You're just leaving several very significant energy-producing materials out of your what you were talking about. You know what I'm talking about: natural gas, coal, carbon capture, utilization. I'll just put that on the record. My question is, you can head out now. That was my comment to you. Thank you. My question is on.
I just would add, carbon capture, Waxman Markey had $200 billion for carbon capture and $200 billion for carbon capture and sequestration. So again, we're totally open to any negotiation on carbon, hydrogen, all those issues.
Thank you. Ms. Korsnick, on the, during COVID, there were lessons learned all around the horn, I think, on everything, but certainly some lessons learned in the NRC in the way they did some inspections by, greater remote access to plant data. I'm wondering if you have any examples of how they've improved, these plants have improved their operations because of some of the lessons learned during the COVID pandemic.
Yes, thank you, Senator. We actually had great success during COVID. We were able to run all of the refueling outages and significant work at all of our nuclear plants during this COVID experience. And as you mentioned, one of those things was to kind of think about maybe more creative ways that the NRC could conduct their oversight of our operations. And at the end of the day, it proved in some cases more efficient and helpful for them. And so we very much look to identify some of those best practices and integrate those lessons learned into permanent processes and procedures of the NRC. So, for example, they were able to conduct several of their inspections remotely, and not everything, I'd say, avails itself to that kind of inspection, and so we're not saying we don't need NRC inspectors on site by any means, but there were ways we think that they can run their business more efficiently, and we allowed them sort of more access remotely to our sites to facilitate it. I think it was a win-win.
Good, good. Mr. Harrell, a final question from me on the Stranded Act. I didn't know if, obviously there's a cost to everything, and there is an authorization level, I believe, in the act that Senator Duckworth has brought forward. I didn't know if you at ClearPath had done any kind of estimate as to what the actual cost of something such as the Stranded Act could cost.
Yeah, it's a great question, Senator Capito. I mean, if these economic impact grants continued indefinitely towards 2050, we're looking at $2 trillion, and so No doubt, the status quo serves no one well, and I think that includes Zion, Illinois. And so we need a variety of solutions to the spent fuel problem. I think innovation can play a major role in that. And so I think you've included some important provisions in ANIA to get at the support for communities who formerly hosted sites. I think one of the biggest things we do, and kudos to you and many members of this committee, including the chairman, on the infrastructure bill, one of the biggest things we can do is avoid closing these plants altogether so we don't have this economic story. And then, advanced reactors can play a role in using spent fuel. And there's innovation in storage of fuel. There's exciting companies like Deep Isolation that are looking at storing spent fuel and boreholes. And so I think that's an area where we could wisely spend in dollars and get to a solution. Because I do worry if a $2 trillion program over the next 30 years is established, we're just perpetuating the same problem that
Right.
exists.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.